Hello everyone, we'll start the session today. So, we were going through some Spring Boot annotations yesterday, and we had gone through like three or four Spring Boot annotations. So, we'll continue from there. So, last class we had seen the usage of Spring Boot configuration annotation, and then we saw this enable auto configuration annotation, and we also saw this component scan annotation. And at the end, we saw this most important Spring Boot application annotation. And we know that this Spring Boot application annotation, this is like equivalent to all the three annotations like Spring Boot configuration, enable auto configuration, and component scan. So if you just apply this Spring Boot application annotation on top of your class, means it's a class level annotation, so you will have to apply this annotation on top of your class, and it does the all the three things. Like, it will be helping you with the configurations of the Spring Boot project. It will also allow you to do enable the auto configuration. It will help you to uh, embed the Tomcat server and provide the Spring MVC features. And also it will allow you to do the component scanning. Means whatever beans you have in your project, whatever Spring beans you have in your project, whatever components you have in your project, that component scan will help you to uh, recognize, means the Spring beans and the components will be recognized. So all these functionalities can be done with the help of a single annotation, that is at the rate Spring Boot application. And we will be using this Spring Boot application annotation a lot. Means in this uh, when you develop a Spring Boot application, there's one bootstrap class, and this is like your bootstrap class. Means by bootstrap class I mean that it is the starting point of your application. Once you run this program, you see this code, right? Spring application dot run, and you have provided the class name and the string arguments. So once you run this particular code in your editor, what happens? Your Spring Boot application starts, and there's an application context that is getting created. And once that application context gets created, this Spring Boot application annotation under the hood does all the things for you. Means it will create an application context, and it will help you to inject the Spring Beans, auto wire the dependencies, and a lot more. And things become quite easy for a developer. Means you don't have to like worry a lot about the configuration items. So you just can focus on the business logic that you need to implement. Means configurations has become like very easy. Even if you like want to connect to the database, you don't have to like write a lot of code. Means you just have to mention something in the property files, that Spring Boot automatically does it for you. Means that connection to the database and all those things are also very easy. So we'll see how those things can be like configured when we start our demo. So this Spring Boot application annotation, this is the most important annotation, and it does a lot of things for you. It will create the application context. It will uh, do all the work equivalent to all these three annotations. So in our project, we will be using this at the rate Spring Boot application annotation, and we'll try to like avoid the three above annotations like Spring Boot configuration, enable auto configuration, and component scan. We might not have to use those three annotations. With the help of like single Spring Boot application annotation, we should be able to like do all the configuration items. So let's see, we had seen until here yesterday, so let's go through some more annotations. So we have this controller annotation. So this is at the rate controller annotation. So this annotation provides Spring MVC features. It is used to create controller classes, and simultaneously it handles the HTTP requests. Generally, we use controller annotation with request mapping annotation to map HTTP request with methods inside a controller class. So prior to Spring Boot, people used to uh, work with Spring MVC. So Spring MVC means the model view controller. So Spring MVC was also like very popular until and unless Spring Boot came into picture. So this controller annotation was basically used with a controller layer, that is the front layer which receives the request. The front layer which basically the presentation layer, you can say, the presentation layer which basically receives the incoming requests into your backend application, that is your controller layer or the presentation layer. So in that class we basically used to use this @controller annotation, and you you have to create your REST APIs, right? Like your HTTP requests. Means we have talked about the REST APIs like your GET request, POST request, delete request, and PUT request. So those are some of the popular REST API HTTP requests. So using this presentation layer, you can handle all these REST request mappings. Means there was an annotation like request mapping which was used to handle this HTTP request. We'll see the usage of request mapping when we go through the further slides. So in this controller layer, we basically used @controller annotation at the class level. Means on top of the class where you just write your controller class. Let's say you have written public class employee controller. On top of that, you can write this @controller annotation. So this was using when we used to use this Spring MVC features. So we used to use this @controller annotation. So this annotation is basically used for defining a presentation layer. Means the controller class that you have, the front layer that you have for receiving the incoming request was using this controller annotation at the class level, and it was used along with different annotations like request mapping to handle different type of HTTP requests. And by HTTP request, I mean different HTTP requests like get HTTP request, put HTTP request, post HTTP request, or delete, patch, those kind of HTTP requests. So let's see this next annotation. We have REST controller annotation. So this annotation is used to handle REST APIs such as get, put, post, delete, etc., and also used to create RESTful web services using Spring MVC. It encapsulates controller annotation and response body annotation with their default attributes. So see, this REST controller annotation is also similar to your controller annotation, but when you use this annotation, this REST controller annotation, this is also a class level annotation. Means this annotation will be used in your controller class, and this will be also used on top of the class. Means it's a class level annotation, and this is also used for handling your REST APIs or your HTTP request like get, put, post, delete, and it helps in creating your RESTful web services, and it also helps in like it does the work of two annotations for you. Means controller annotation and response body annotation, when these are basically combined, it means this REST controller is basically equivalent to your controller and response body annotation. We'll see what response body annotation is. Basically, response body annotation is like it helps you to get the responses in the form of JSON, XML, or HTML. So that is the use of this response body annotation. But this REST controller annotation, this is like equivalent to basically this controller annotation and response body annotation with their default attributes. Means this two attributes can also be modified. Means you can provide different properties to these two annotations, but when we use them with the default values, REST controller basically encapsulates, or we can say it is equivalent to this at the rate controller annotation and response body annotation. Okay, let's see this request mapping annotation. So this annotation is used to map the HTTP request with the handler methods inside the controller class. So last slide we were seeing about the controller class, right? And we had mentioned that we will be using request mapping annotation along with the uh, controller class. So let's see this example. What we are trying to do. Let's suppose, say we have a requirement where we want to fetch the employee name, and we want to return something out of when we want to like return an employee name, fetch employee name, that means we are expecting a string output as a response, right? So see this method, like public string fetch employee name, means we have some kind of code written over here which returns the name. Let's say we are returning name from this particular method. So see this class here. What we are doing is we are annotating the class with at the rate rest controller. And what we are doing at the method level means each method can handle like different kinds of resources. Let's say you want to create an employee record in the database. So in that case, what you will do, you will use a post mapping or a post method. Means you want to create a new resource which is not there, so that means you can create a post request. But here what we want to do, we want to fetch some kind of information, we want to get some kind of information, and that can be done with a REST API, that is get API. So we can use this at the rate request mapping, and then in the method equal to request mapping dot get. So this dot get specifies that we want to fetch some kind of information from this method. So this request mapping will be applied at the method level. So here we are applying this request mapping annotation. So we'll see how this request mapping can be like replaced with certain other annotations like get mapping, put mapping, and those things. But here we can understand this, that this request mapping annotation will be used to handle different kind of HTTP requests. Let's say we wanted to delete some employee records. Let's say we had a method where we want to delete employee name. So we can have one another method where we could name it like delete employee name, and in the request mapping we can specify like method equal to request mapping dot delete. So the type of HTTP request that we want to handle should be specified in this method, in this request mapping, along with the method name, means along with the method type. If we want to delete something, we can have something like request mapping dot delete. If we want to create a new resource, we can have something like request mapping dot post. And if we want to like modify something, some existing record which needs to be modified, we can have something like method equal to request mapping dot put. So we'll see all these things when we start our demo. So see, uh, there are Spring Boot annotations. So these are like these annotations are also used for handling HTTP requests, and these are like get mapping, put mapping, post mapping, delete mapping. So we can replace this request mapping. We can replace this request mapping with these four HTTP requests. Let's say here what we have used in this slide is request mapping, and then we had to like specify the method type like request mapping dot get. So if we want to replace this entire line, what we can do, we can just write something like at the rate get mapping, and in the parenthesis we can specify the value is basically the URL that you want to like specify. Means you want to like have some kind of like URL, like let's say your URL is something like http localhost 9090 and then slash fetch slash employee, something like that. And what you want to do, you can replace this entire line like at the rate request mapping value equal to this method equal to request mapping dot get with the with at the rate get mapping. So get mapping is like kind of a specific annotation which is used only for fetching the information. And then there is this put mapping. By name we understand that this will be put mapping will be used to modify the existing records, and post mapping will be used for creating a new resource, and delete mapping will be used for deleting a resource from our presentation layer. So see, we can manually use get, post, put and delete annotations along with the path as well as we can use request mapping annotation along with the method for all the above handler requests. So we can do either way. Either way it is fine. We can use request mapping and specify the type of methods that we want to use, or we can just go ahead with the type of annotation. Means if we are very specific, what we can do, we can use this get mapping, put mapping, post mapping and delete mapping. So see what are the type of URLs that you will be providing some. So I'm just showing something like this HTTPS. Let's say your server is running on your local system. So your URL would be something like this. And let's say your server is running on some port. So when you write your URLs, you will be mentioning your server. This is localhost is basically your IP address, and this is your port. And let's say your service is something like employee service, or let's say what you want to do is web service slash, let's say employee slash fetch, and let's say 1 2 3 4. So this will be some kind of like URL. See, we need to like specify this. HTTPS is basically a secured uh, means HTTP is like for secured connection. Local host is basically your it's your server IP. 8080 is basically your server port. And let's say this web service, this web service, we want all the request of this application to go with at the rate web service. And for this particular uh, method, let's say when we are handling this method, we are fetching employee name. So what we want to do is we want to write some kind of URL like slash employee slash fetch, and let's say we are passing some ID of the employee 1234. So this is the kind of URL which we should be basically using in a get mapping. Means I'll show you more examples when we go through the demo. So at that time we'll see the usage of all those things, like where we can use different parameters along with this URL, where we can have different path variables along with these URLs. So I'll demonstrate those as well. So for now, you can understand that this will be like kind of a URL that you will be hitting through your browser or through your postman. So at the end of this class, we'll do some installations as well, and we'll be ready for the next class where we'll start the demo. So So these are the four annotations like get mapping, put mapping, post mapping, and delete mapping. So this can be used alternative to the request mapping. Now see this. This is another important annotation like at the rate request annotation. So this annotation is basically used to obtain a parameter from a URI. In other words, we can say that request param annotation is used to read the form data and binds the web request parameter to a specific controller method. Okay, so see this example. In this example, we have our controller class, like your controller class is named my controller, and on top of the class, you are using this at the rate rest controller method, sorry, rest controller annotation. And see, this example is basically using get mapping. We had seen how we were using this request mapping in the previous slides, right? Request mapping along with the method and specified like request mapping dot get. Now we are replacing this, and what we are doing, we are just using this at the rate get mapping. So these two are like equivalent, and this is like much cleaner than the request mapping annotation. Means we had to like specify more things there, but when we use this at the rate get mapping, this is equivalent to your at the rate request mapping and method equal to request type dot get. So these two are equivalent, so you can use this way as well, like get mapping. And what we are trying to do, we are passing the type of URL slash others. So let's say we can do something like this. If we want to modify this, let's say we want to get all the authors from this API, means you want to fetch all the authors. So see, this web service is not in your method definition, right? Here we have not specified this web service, but this web service, will see how this comes when we start coding. Means we you can have some kind of base URL for your project. Means when I talk something about base URL, that base URL is basically used with all the requests, and whatever URLs you want to have, like at the rate authors for this particular API, right? So that you will be like mentioning in the method, you will be mentioning in that particular method or API. Let's see here, this is get authors method. So here you are specifying this slash authors. So this web service is basically your base URL, which we will be configuring at the class level. Means it is common to all your methods or all your APIs that you want to use, and this others is basically used at the method level. And see this, we want to like see the usage of this request param. So what we are basically saying, how we want to like use in the parameters, right? We are passing some information. Just see this, we are passing some information like at the rate request param name equal to author name. So your URL will be modified something like this whenever you use your request param, right? So the URL gets modified something like this. You have request param means we are passing a parameter, and that parameter is basically in the form of a key value. And what is the key? Key is basically your author name. So your URL will get modified the on the browser what you want to hit, or from the postman what you want to hit, something like this. You want to hit a request something like this. Let's say author name equal to John. So this is the kind of URL which will be handling your request param. So see, this name is equal to author name, so this is basically your key. So this should be exactly like, it should be case sensitive and it should be here. And let's say you are passing John. So what this API is doing, this is like fetching all the others, and means this is trying to fetch the author with the author name like John. So that is why what you want to do is, you want to like pass some request param if you want to get something like specific. Now let's say we wanted to fetch the authors by their ID name, sorry, IDs. Let's say the author has some kind of like ID or identifier. So let's say we want to like pass something like this: ID is equal to 123. So alternatively, what we have to like change here is, we want to change here is request map param name is equal to ID. In this example, what we have to change, we have to change this author name to ID. So then we can use the URLs like this. So understand that whenever we are using request params in our URL, we need to use this at the rate request param annotation and provide name is equal to key here, and we will be passing the values dynamically. So your URL will be looking like this. Localhost is basically your server IP, 8080 is your server port, web service is your base URL, others is basically the URL that we are using for this method, and ID is basically the key, and 123 is the value that we are providing to that key. Are you able to follow, or this, or there is any confusion? Means if you are able to like follow these things, things will be quite easier when I start with the development. Let me know if you have any questions in this. If it is fine, I can like proceed further. Means you need to like basically understand the usage of all these annotations, when exactly we use, and then like things will be very easy when we start the development. So let's see another example. This is like another annotation, and this is your path variable annotation. So this annotation is used to extract data from the URI path. It binds the URL template with path variable and with the method variable. So this is also like passing something in the URL. Means you have your base URL, you have your method level URL, and then you want to pass something. See this example. What we are trying to do here, we are trying to fetch the author name with this method like at the rate get author name. So in this example, what we are doing, we are passing the URL as slash author, and in these curly braces we are passing this other name, right? So we will be passing a value for this in the URL. Let's say slash other, and this is in the curly braces, this is other name, and your path variable is basically name is equal to other name. So we have specified here that the path variable should be name is equal to other name. Let's see how our URL changes. So instead of this question mark and ID equal to 123, means this was for request param. Now what we can do is author slash, let's say we had passed this, we want to pass this author name. So author slash John. So your URL will get modified. Means this John is basically a replacement for this. In your method you saw this author name, right? So this is getting replaced, this is getting replaced with the dynamic value that we provide in our URL. So what happens when you provide this John value is replacing this slash, this John value is replacing this curly braces other name. So this value that you have here is getting replaced with the value that you provide at the end. Like after this other, your URL identifier identifies that our author name is basically getting replaced by this John value. So your URL gets modified something like this. So this is used when we want to have some things in the, if we want to pass something in the path variable. So path variable is like by name we can understand that this is our path, like web service slash author slash some dynamic value, and that dynamic value is your author name, and its value will be provided by any user who wants to get that request. Means what we want to do is we want to fetch the author John's some details. We want to fetch the details of the author John from our web service. So your URL gets modified something like this. So in this case, we can use path variable annotation. Now let's see this another Spring Boot annotation. So we have
If
this.
Rita,
Yes.
yeah, if we give a name, so why we use carnivorous author name?
Okay. So in your means in your code, when we use this curly braces, right, it's kind of like showing that this is a placeholder. Means it shows that this is a kind of placeholder. Your Spring Boot application identifies along with this get mapping whenever you give this slash other and along with this curly braces something. And see here in our method level, in this get author name, adjacent to that we are passing that, we are passing something like at the rate path variable name equal to author name. So by this Spring Boot application knows that this author name is basically a placeholder which will be replaced by some value when we hit the URL. So that value basically, that John replaces this entire placeholder. Placeholder means whenever you hit a form, whenever you are creating a form, you have some kind of like placeholder, right, which you want to replace at the which you want to like replace dynamically at runtime. So this is like kind of a placeholder. This placeholder is replaced by some value at runtime. So that is why we have this at the rate curly braces. So when we use this at the rate curly braces and some path variable name, so Spring Boot identifies this is a placeholder which will be replaced by the request of the user. Whatever the client tries to hit on a browser, that value will be replacing this placeholder. Understood? Yes, sir?
Yes, so when we use right URL, so for my understood this is author carnivorous author name. This is for the resource or paths. So when we use URL, so are we used as it is
Yeah,
with carnivorous, but you are removed for carnivorous when you
yeah,
write John.
yeah. So whenever
So
we use this John, right? So let's say we are, our server is running, our server is running, our application is running, and I want to fetch some information related to one of the authors whose name is John, and I hit this kind of URL, means I press enter from the keyboard. So how our application, means when we hit this URL, right, our it will like go and hit some kind of like code in our application. You understand that? So in our code, our this URL will be hit, this get mapping method will be hit, and this get mapping method, this is getting replaced by
okay,
slash
go.
slash author
Understood.
slash John. So when this method gets this information like slash John, so we must be having some kind of code here, right? In this code we might be having some method to write something, to fetch some details related to John. So this method has now this variable like string name. So this string name will be basically, this name will be assigned a value of John. And now that your variable has this value of John, you can use that, right? Means if you have some value in your variable, it can be used in your application to do some further processing. Got it?
Yeah, guys. Yeah, yeah. When we pass the value, we are not using the
Yeah,
curly brace. Yeah.
yeah. So this is used for basically your application needs some information. So from that URL, we are passing that value dynamically. When we develop the application, means I want to like give a level overview before like starting any development. If I don't give this overview, right, at the means if I start to like just code and start showing you the demos, means it will be like even more difficult. So that is why it a high level overview and a highlight of those things which we are going to develop. So if those information is available to you at first hand, things will be like a lot easier when it comes to development. By the time you already understand this, the usage of these annotations, why we are using these annotations. So let's see other annotation. So this is like request body annotation. So this annotation is used to convert HTTP request from incoming JSON format to domain objects directly from the request body. Here method parameter binds the body of the HTTP request. So see, this is again our controller uh, class. My controller is basically our controller class because we have specified this at the rate rest controller annotation above the class level. And what we are trying to do, we are again using a get mapping, means this is a this is an API to fetch some kind of information. Whenever we use some get mapping, that means that this is a API to fetch some kind of information from the web service. And what we are trying to do is we are trying to print something like public void print author, and we are using this annotation at the rate request body author. So when we are using this at the rate request body, that means that along with the URL, we are passing some kind of JSON in the payload. Means we are passing some kind of JSON in the payload. JSON is basically your JavaScript object notation. We'll see this when we are develop our code. But this author is basically a class. Let's say the author is a class, and in the class we have some data members like the ID, name, address of author. Let's say we have like few details in the class. So this class is basically, this Java object is basically sent in the form of the payload. So that is why we use this request body. Means we are trying to hit an HTTP request, and in that HTTP request we are basically passing this other payload. Means we will be passing, let's say, ID, name, and address of the author in that JSON format. So if we want to like pass something along with our request, we can use this request body. As of now, we have seen that we were just hitting this URL. So along with this URL, we will be passing something like, means in this curly braces, this is like kind of like payload. Let's say we will have something like ID is equal to, let's say, 123 comma, let's say name colon John. So in JavaScript, JSON is basically something like this. In within the curly braces, there are like pairs of key values. So ID, this is ID, and 123. This is the value assigned to that. And then again we have this ID like name, and we are passing John. So this is like some kind of like other object, or which will be like converted to your JSON and we will be passing this JSON along with this URL. Now let's say we are not passing this name here, we are hitting this URL, and in the payload we are passing some information like this. So see this request, web service slash author, and what which other details do we need? We want to fetch the details of the author whose ID is 123 and whose name is John. So this is like passed along with this particular URL. So this is like, so to pass this information we need to use this request body. Whenever we want to like we want to like pass certain things in the form of a JSON along with our request, we can use this at the rate request body annotation. Got it? Okay, so let's see this response body annotation. So response body annotation is like getting the response. Means in the previous example we saw that we were using request body to pass some things along with our request. Now this response body annotation is used to convert the domain object into HTTP request in the form of JSON or any other text. Here the return type of the method binds with the HTTP response body. So see this class, see this example. This is again our controller class. We can use at the rate controller or we can use at the rate rest controller over this. And see this method. In this method we are passing something along with this return type like public at the rate response body other get other. And what we are trying to do, we are trying to create an object of the other, we are setting the name, we are setting the age of the other, and then we are returning this other. So the return type is basically other data type, right? This is a class, other is a class. We discussed it yesterday as well, right? Like how we can like create a user defined data type. So this is a class data type, means author is basically your class which has some data members like your name, it has age, and it has, let's say, ID as well. And this response body means this API is basically for fetching the information related to this author. And this response body basically tells that once you hit your URL, you will be getting some kind of JSON response from the API, and that will be in the form of an other object which will be converted to JSON. Means in the other object you will get something like means when you hit that URL you will be getting some output like this. Means along with an HTTP status code of 200 you will be getting an output like this. Once you hit the API, means you will be getting, we did not have ID, we had name and age. So you will be getting something like this, age colon 20. So this will be your output response along with a status code of 200. 200 basically tells that you are getting the response properly. So this is the response. So to represent that response, we have to use this at the rate response body along with the uh, at the rate response body in the method that we want to fetch the information for that particular or other. So this is for handling HTTP response. Response body is basically used for HTTP for handling the HTTP response, and request body is used for handling the HTTP requests. So along whenever we want to like pass some request whenever we want to like pass some kind of payload along with our API, we can use this request body and it will handle the HTTP request, and this response body will be basically able to get the HTTP response from the server. So let's see some more annotations. These things will be like more clearer when we start the development and you yourself are starting to develop. So I would recommend each one of you that we will do some basic setup today, and from the next class we will start with the development. So whatever lectures that I'll be like giving, you have to like basically practice, and then only see, once you start getting the errors, then you start learning, and then you will come to know like what are the things I need to understand more. So if I just give the lectures and you don't practice, then it will not be of that much use, because you need to like have some kind of hands-on as well. So along with when I give the development on that particular day, you can go ahead and like again like view the videos if you require, and try to do some kind of development on your own. That will like basically help you to understand the concepts more clearly. So let's see some more annotations. So we have this
Before that,
yeah,
annotation for bodies.
you want to see the
Uh,
previous
yeah,
annotation?
yeah, this example is only one order. This is the information only that. So if we add authors, so how to we add continue for this one like this, or how to we map it, implement.
So implementation, see, here what we are trying to do,
Even
this other,
this is for one done. It's done information. If you add it for gas information, so
no, this is just kind of, see, in this example, I'm not showing you the service layer and the repository layer, right? Means this is like some kind of like static information that I'm populating for your other. Means this is like just kind of like a object that I've created, and I'm trying to show the usage of this response body annotation. But in our real-time project, we won't be creating something like this. This controller layer method will be basically calling your service layer method, and from the service layer method, we will be calling our data layer, and from the data layer we will be hitting the database. We will be getting the information of this particular or other like Dan or John, anything, and then from the data layer you get the information in the service layer, and from the service layer that information is passed to the controller layer. And then once you have that information, your controller layer or presentation layer basically shows that information as a response, that is your HTTP response, and that is basically seen by the user as an output. What is the difference of response and request? uh,
okay, this is for a response body for when we use a request and the response it is different. Yeah.
See, we pass, see, when we want to like pass something as a payload, I'll show you. Okay, I have the postman. See, what I want to do is, let's say I have a post request and I'm using something like this: https localhost 8080 web service. Let's say I want to create a record. So employee, let's say I want to create a record. So in your body, what you will try to do is you will try to convert it to JSON. See, this is JSON, and you would pass something like this: ID, let's say 123, comma, name, John, and age, let's say 20. So see, in this body, clicked on this body, selected this raw, and selected this JSON. So this is our this is our request body. This is our request body because I am passing this information to the server to create a resource. So this record will be created in the database. So this is a new resource that I want to create. And what I'm trying to do, I'm passing this information along with our request. And here, when I pass this information, this is basically called an this is basically called a HTTP request, and this is your request body. And let's say I want to like receive something info means I will hit this send button. Means as of now my server is not running and I don't have this application running. So when I will hit this, I'll get a status response of 201. 201, if you recall, that means that a resource is getting created. So this is your request body that you are passing. So in your body you are basically passing this JSON. And let me go to the slides. So this request body other, this when I pass this information from here postman, this other will basically be populated with these details. Means this other class has some fields like id, name and age. So this will be populated with this kind of information, like id will get a value of 123, name will get a value of John, age will get a value of 20. And this resource will be basically created and it will be sent to the data layer. You understand this? So this is your request body. Now that I want to fetch something, let's say I want to fetch some information. So I'll use get API. And in this get API, what I will try to do, let's say I want to fetch the employee information with the employee ID. So what I try to do is I try to pass this 123 and hit this enter. And once I hit this enter, so let me, so once I hit this enter, in this response, here you see this response, right? Here below this. So this is your response. Here you will be getting some response like this. Means this will be coming as a response when we hit that enter, right? You just hit this much URL and you will be getting a response. Means it communicates with your data layer, it gets that information, and finally that information is presented to you. Are you able to understand now?
Yes, I understand. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay. See, this is the first time you are seeing a lot of these annotations, and that's why it would be like a little confusing because this seems similar like request body, response body, but as and when you start your development, things will be like very easy. And means, but you will have to be like uh, active in your developments as well. Means I will show the demo, I'll like show you how to like perform those things, but you will also have to like do the hands-on exercises yourself as well. So we have seen this request body and response body. Let's see some more annotations. So this is at the rate auto wired annotation. So auto wired is basically used for Spring Framework dependency injection. So we have talked about that example like employee has an address and we are injecting that address object into the employee, right? So this auto wired basically helps in your dependency injection. So it's used for injecting any dependency. Like if your class is dependent on any object, so it will help you to inject that particular dependency without creating the object of that particular class. Means under the hood, means Spring Boot creates that object and returns it, but you won't have to like create that object explicitly anywhere in your code. So see, in other words, by declaring all the bean dependencies in the Spring configuration file, Spring container can auto-wire relationships between collaborating beans. This is called Spring Bean auto-wiring. Okay, to simplify things, You have Spring Beans, and Spring Beans are basically like components in Spring. So if we want to like inject any dependency, we have to make that dependent object as a component. And how we can make that component? Let's say we have this formatter class, and I want to use this formatter class in some other class as a dependency. Means we want to inject this formatter class in some other class. So what we will try to do, we will try to make this formatter class as a component. So how we can make that component? We can make with the help of @component annotation. And once we use this @component annotation, let's say we provide some name here like formatter. So there are different types of ways which we can like inject this dependency. Let's see the first way. So auto-wired on property. So see, this is a formatter service. The below code in this class we are using a formatter service. And in this formatter service, we are trying to inject this formatter class. So how we will inject? So when we want to like inject with the help of using this auto-wired on property. Property means basically your instance variable. So you have created one instance variable, private formatter. Again, this formatter is a class level data type which you have already created here above. So what you can just do, you can just do an @auto-wired. You can just do an @auto-wired, and this class is available to you. The object of this class is available to you. Any methods, if let's see, means your formatter class has some 2 3 methods, like let's say this class has 3 methods, so all those methods are now available to you in this formatter service. Once you inject that dependency in this formatter service class, then all those methods are available to you in this formatter service class, and you can call those methods. So this is like using auto-wired on property. Now there are like other things as well when we can like use this auto-wired on constructors. So if you want to do, means this was one way of injecting the dependency, like when you want to like use auto-wired on property, means on the instance variable itself you have like mentioned @auto-wired. Now let's see this. If you want to use constructor injection, means we have talked about dependency injection using constructors, right? So see this, what we are trying to do, we are again creating one instance variable here, private formatter, but see the difference in the previous slide, we are using the @auto-wired as well along with the instance variable. So this is like property level injection. Now when I want to do a constructor level injection, what I have to do, I have to create a constructor of this class formatter service. So I'm creating a constructor public formatter service, and I'm injecting this dependency like formatter and this dot formatter equal to formatter. When I say this dot formatter equal to formatter, it is basically initializing your data member which is declared above, and you can use this @auto-wired annotation on just on top of your constructor. So this is called your constructor level injection. Similarly, if you want to do a setter level injection, means there will be just one change, that instead of this constructor, you will use it on a setter method. Let's see the next slide. See this auto wired on setters. So when I want to use this auto wired on setters, see what I'm changing here. I'm just changing a little bit, like public void set formatter, means this is a method. You're generating that getters and setters from your editors, right? So what is the usage of setters? Setters is basically a setter method is basically used for setting your instance variables. So either you can like set it with the help of your constructors, or you can use your setter method. So we are using the same, we are using like the same code, we are initializing the same data member, but here we are using the constructor. Constructor is, see, constructor is also a special method only, right? Constructor is also a special method which has the same name of the class name, but here we have a setter method, and this setter method can be defined as like set formatter, and we are initializing this data members. So see, we have like three types of auto wiring. One is like we can use the auto wired annotation on the field or the property. Other is we can use auto wired annotation on this constructor, and then we can use auto wired on the setter methods. So there are like three types of injections or dependency injection types. So we can inject the dependencies in these three types. So once we start coding, things will be like even more clear. But this is a high level picture of using AutoWire. So did you understand this, or you have any questions? Okay, we'll move to other slide. Let's see. This is another annotation like qualifier. So qualifier annotation is sometimes being used with AutoWide. This qualifier annotation, whenever it will be used along with the AutoWide annotation, and this is used in conjunction with AutoWide to specify which exact bean should be injected when there are multiple beans of the same type in the application context. You use qualifier to provide a specific bean name or value to indicate which bean should be injected. So let's say you have movie catalog class defined somewhere in your application, and you have like movie catalog class, you have like two different movie catalog class defined in your application. Let's say the name of one is main movie catalog, and the name of the other movie catalog is secondary movie catalog. So you have two movie catalogs which are defined in your application. One is the main movie catalog and one is the secondary movie catalog. So if you are just trying to inject that dependency just by using AutoWire, so your application will be basically confused which movie catalog I want to inject, right? Which movie catalog I want to inject. So there is some confusion in your application. Now to simplify things, what you can do along with that AutoWire, so AutoWire is basically injecting your dependency, and qualifier basically helps. In the qualifier annotation, you can basically pass the name of the movie catalog. Let's say the names of the movie catalog, where one of the movie catalog was main and the other movie catalog was basically secondary. So you want to call the main movie catalog. So in the qualifier, you can basically just pass the name of the movie catalog that you want to call. So it is basically used when we have like lot of bean definitions for the same object. So movie catalog is one object, but we have, let's say, multiple definitions for this movie catalog. So our application should understand which which bean, which spring bean we have to call. So that is when we will be calling this, we will be using this qualifier annotation along with the auto word annotation. Did you understand? Anyone has any queries on this at the rate qualifier? Okay, so let's see, we are left with some few more annotations, and one is like at the rate service annotation. So see, In the previous examples, we saw that we were using formatter service as a component. Now, if we are very sure that this is the place where we are writing our business logic of the application, then we can annotate this class as a service. Means at the rate service, at the rate repository, when I mention some class as a at the rate service or at the rate repository, those are also considered as a component with a special meaning, that this is the service. So see, the business logic of an application usually resides within the service layer. So we will use the service annotation to indicate that a class belongs to the service layer. So this formatter service is basically our service class. So earlier example we saw that we were using the annotation at the rate component over this, right? At the rate component is a generic annotation that specifies that the class is a component. Now, if we want to like specify that this class is our service class, so we can use this at the rate service annotation. Rest of the code is just similar, means rest of the code is same. I'll show you this class. Just see this class here. At the rate component is being used in this formatter service class, right? We have just replaced this at the rate component with at the rate service here. This is the only change. Means we want to like make something specific, that this component is basically our service class. This is basically a service layer, and in this service layer basically we will write the entire business logic of our application. So this is a specific annotation. Every service, every repository, every controller is a component in itself. But when you use the specific annotations like at the rate service, you understand that that particular component is basically your service. Here you have to basically write your business logic of the application. Let's see some one more slide, and this is like at the rate repository. So the data layer of an application usually resides within this repository layer. So we will use the repository annotation to indicate that a class belongs to the repository layer. So see, whenever you want to create a component that handles your data layer, means the code that you are basically using to interact with your database, you want to query something from the database, you want to like insert something from the database, that particular class can be named as a special component, and that special component name is at the rate repository. Means whatever component is basically dealing with your data layer, talking to your database, communicating with your database, inserting any queries in the database, so that component can be termed as a repository. And that's why we can use at the rate repository on that particular class. Means if this, let's say this formatter repository is the class which is basically like communicating with your database, you have all the queries written for fetching or inserting something into the database tables. So that class can be named as a component, and means a special component. That special component is called a repository, and we can use this at the rate repository and annotation on top of that. So this was about the annotations, and this is like more or less of the theoretical concepts that I wanted to cover. So we'll get ready for the next class. We'll do a quick setup of something, so that we don't have to like get we don't want to like keep waiting with the installation things in the next class. uh, so I'm pinging you this URL. You can go ahead, and whoever does not have this Postman, right? We will be using this Postman for like hitting our APIs. So everyone kindly go ahead and try to like hit this URL, and the ones whoever is like using Windows, just see this below this Mac Intel chip and all, what you are trying to see, download for Windows, right here, this download for Windows. You can go ahead and try to like click here on this download for Windows 64, and it will basically download that for you, and you can go ahead and install that. Try to install this Postman, keep the setup ready so that you can see this is this Windows 64 setup.exe. Just click on this exe file and you will be able to install this. Keep these installations ready so that it we don't have to like spend any time in installation. And for those who are like using Mac OS, so you can go ahead and click on this Mac Apple chip, and you will be getting a DMG file, and you can basically go ahead and like install that. So we would need this Postman for installation. Anyone facing any issues with installation can let me know just now. Next class we won't be like focusing on this installation part. That's why I want to complete this installations now. You can download it and install it. Anyone who has like Postman already installed?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. Yeah, so you already have. Anyone else who the people who don't have the Postman installation, kindly go ahead and do a quick installation. Or I have like I have not given this. Okay, I have already given this link in the chat, right? So you can go ahead and do a quick installation. And also we want to like uh, do a installation of Maven. So I'm pasting this as well. This is the URL. You can click on this URL and go ahead, and once you hit that URL, you will be taken to this Apache Maven website. And here in this website, what you want to do, you see these links, right? You see these links, right? You have to basically click the second link, like binary zip. And what you can do is you can click on this Apache Maven, this second option, Apache Maven 3.9.6 bin.zip. You can click on this. So once you click on that, you will be getting something like down in your downloads. You'll be getting one zip file, and that zip file you will have to extract. You can keep that once you extract that zip file, you can keep that in your documents. And now you will have to basically set your path variables. So anyone who is having Windows can like share screen, because I have a Mac and I won't be able to show you that installation, means the path setup thing. Guess how would you like to volunteer?
Yeah, sure. Let me share.
Yeah. Okay, I'll enable the sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, it is good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
give me a.
everyone, are you done with the download of that Maven? Just download that zip file and try to extract that. Yeah. So this is the You have not downloaded this Maven, right? Yes, sir.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, click on this. Yeah, second option. Yeah, so it is downloading. You can go ahead in this folder. Try to extract that. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that is fine. Or you can like extract it in your document folder. Everyone, please follow this step. Can you go to the desktop?
Person name
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah. So copy this path. Copy this path here. Yeah, yeah. Copy this path.
Before bin,
No, no,
include bin or
no, no. This
not?
is fine. This is fine. So we'll
Okay.
see. Okay, everyone, please see this. See, we have downloaded that Apache Maven and we have extracted that as well. And we want to select this path. We want to go once you have like extracted that, you can click on that Apache Maven folder and select this path. And now we will be setting the path variable. So Gaso, can you open your system variables, environment, search with
Okay.
environment, and yeah,
Okay.
edit environment variables, edit the system variables. Yeah, click on that environment variables. Everyone, just see this.
Yeah.
So what you can do, you can cancel this. So in your system variable, just below that, no, no,
Oh,
do
new.
one thing. You can click on new. You can name Maven underscore home, all in caps. Maven, Maven. There's a typo. Maven.
Oh, sorry, sorry. Yeah.
No, no problem. Yeah, and paste that path in the variable value. Yeah, click on OK. And what you can do, you can click on that path now. You see that path. You click on edit and you click on new. And here, what you can do, you make that
First.
percent and
Mm.
use that variable like Maven underscore home
Yeah, underscore home.
and again percent followed by percent.
Yeah,
Now slash bin, backslash bin, the way you have used for Java home, right? Yeah,
yeah.
click on OK. Again, click on OK. Yeah, and click on OK again. Now open some command prompt, CMD. Everyone, please try to follow this and just write mvn hyphen version, mvn. I think no. Can you write
No.
mvn,
Yeah,
mv, not the entire Maven, mvn
yeah,
I think you need
sorry.
a space.
Yeah, no, no. Mm.
space. No, after mvn just put a space and then version.
Mm.
Uh, Before version, just put a hyphen
Yeah,
dash. Yes. Click on enter. See, you you can see the Apache Maven version, right? See, Apache Maven version. I think you already had Maven installed, is it? Because it is showing like different version,
yeah,
3.6.3.
different.
Okay,
I think so. Yeah,
I
I
think
think so.
you
Yeah.
already have something like installed. But this is so for everyone who doesn't uh, have Maven, you can like follow these steps. So what we just saw, we downloaded the Apache Maven zip file, we extracted that zip file, and we uh, copied it into our documents folder. and from the documents folder we copied the path, and then we went ahead to our system variables, environment variables, and we created a maven home path variable and pasted the path. And then in the path we basically went ahead and tried to uh, create that maven home underscore followed by the bin, means the path until the bin. So once you do that, you will be able to see the maven version here. You can like verify with this command mvn hyphen version. So anyone who is trying and not able to follow this can ask now. Okay, so this was for Windows. Gaso, you can stop sharing. I'll just show for Mac OS as well. So the process is similar. You will have to like download the same zip file and just copy it and keep it anywhere. Let's say I've kept it in the document folder. And how you basically extract the how you basically set the path in a Mac OS system. What you can do uh, like vi. Okay, let me try to clear this. What you can try to do is vi underscore no, this is not underscore, this is tilde symbol slash dot zshrc, and see this. Here we are basically setting the path of the maven. So if you see this last line, right, this one, this last line you will have to paste it. Means anyone who is using Mac OS now and needs help in installation, means setting the path, all of you are on Windows or anyone is using Mac. So if anyone is using Mac, right? So this is the way to do. You can do an export path is equal to, and then provide the path until bin here, like slash users slash Pritam Kumar is my username and documents, and then the path of this Apache Maven slash bin followed by this colon under this dollar path. So this is the way to do the installation of sorry, not the installation, means like downloading maven and setting the path of maven. So this is the way. So if anyone has still not done, kindly do it before our next class, because we would be starting with the development. If you are not done with the setup at all, I'll be like uploading this video as well. You can like go ahead and try to do the installation of Postman and this Maven, and we'll start with the development in the next class. We have like done most of the theory, means there might be few theoretical concepts still left, but most of the things like the important things are covered. And as on when we like start the development and go ahead along with the development, if anything more is like required in theory, we will cover it. So you have like the basic knowledge of Spring Boot now. Means you have seen like how Spring Boot works, how different annotations work, how dependency injection works, and what are the different ways of dependency injections. You have seen like how request mapping, controller layer, service layer, repository layer, how these things work. But you have a theoretical knowledge of these things as of now. So once we start the development, you will get to know how these things work. So that will be it for today. If anyone has any questions, you can ask, or we'll conclude the call for today. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.